One of the difficult things about my job as a dating coach is doing really great work with men and women, watching them become more confident in themselves and start dating a lot more people. And suddenly they find someone that they want to enter into a long-term relationship with. But it's one that I can clearly see from my years and years and years of experience that is going to definitely end in heartbreak. Now, from a business standpoint, you could say this is a good thing because they do come back to me as repeat customers. But the downside is I would really rather they get this right the first time, not have to go through that kind of heartbreak and pain that long-term relationships ending always lead to. So today I want to talk about a really big trap that's super common that I see both men and women falling into when they're seeking long-term relationships. And I don't see it talked about very often at all here in YouTube. I call it the sexy safety island of perfection. And the great thing about understanding this is, first of all, you'll be able to find far better suited partners who are more likely to be able to go the distance with you without ending in pain. And also, equally as importantly, you'll be able to know where you need to move yourself and your own self-development to be a more eligible partner for that kind of person. So you can more likely attract that kind of person into your life. So there is a kind of emotional spectrum that I call the sexy safety spectrum. And every person on this planet falls somewhere on that spectrum with their behaviors. So at the safety end, what you'll have is you'll have someone who, when they're dating, they are very safe. They are completely reliable. You always know where you stand with them. They think about your wants and needs all the time. They're very balanced in conversation and thinking things through and problem solving. They're always there. What they want from long-term plans and relationships is very steady, very reliable. They're super consistent, right? So you get all this really good stuff, this safety that everyone craves to some degree in a relationship exists at the safety end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, you have the sexy end of the spectrum. So at this end, you have far more unpredictability, right? They're not very predictable. They can't necessarily be relied on so well. Sometimes they can behave erratically, right? But here's the thing. They are adventurous. They are exciting, right? When you go on dates with these people, you're always doing something new and novel. Novelty is a big one, right? Novelty is a little bit addictive. And what's more is their own unpredictability becomes addictive because humans are wired to become addicted to intermittent rewards, right? Sometimes you get a big reward from them, sometimes you don't. But the reward you do get are way bigger, way more exciting than the reward you would get from someone at the safety end of the spectrum. The other thing with someone at the sexy end of the spectrum is that the sexual experience with them can be highly addictive because it is so intense and passionate compared to people on the safety end of the spectrum, right? So you get this kind of this good and bad at one end and you get the good and bad at the other end of that spectrum. So the general rule of thumb with who we should date is someone who lies roughly in the same area of the spectrum as you are yourself. But there's a catch, and this is where a lot of people get tripped up. You need to find someone who is on the spectrum where you would be if you were emotionally healthy, had dealt with a lot of your traumas, weren't being held back by societal or parental expectations of you. Where would you lie in that instance? Because that's the person who's the most ideally suited for yourself. So here are the ways in which I see people dating the completely wrong person using this spectrum as a reference point. So the first thing is that I very often see people who have been traumatized in past relationships or traumatized by friends or parents watching their parents' relationships. And what they often do then is they launch to the opposite. Because what we often feel is, I had XYZ playing out in my life. I'm going to jump to the opposite because that must be better, right? I was with an ex who was completely unreliable. I had no safety in my life. Clearly what I need is safety. This person is super safe. I'm going to go with them. Right? Or we do the opposite. I was so bored with my ex, like I just lost the passion, I lost the excitement. I felt like I lost myself in the process. I'm going to find someone who's wild and sexy and adventurous because I need that in my life. So we jump to the other end of the spectrum based on our traumas. And that you can clearly see that won't last. That will only last so long as that trauma is playing out in your body. But once you've processed it, you'll suddenly feel like you're with the wrong person. The second way that I see people get tripped up is they get addicted to the sexy end of the spectrum. So I know this, I've had this happen to me as well, where you find someone who is so exciting, like the sex is, oh my God, right? You find yourself in a daze after a sexual experience with them, right? You get intimate with them and it's like your whole head is muddy for a day and like you're in this positive aura, you feel really good. Sure, they aren't completely reliable, but the adventures you go on and you get really wrapped up in this whole thing. And the addiction to this can be so great that you don't want to give it up. You can see your friends might be shouting at you, hey, this person is cheating on you, or they're going to cheat on you, or you think they may have cheated on you, or maybe there's no cheating going on, but like everyone can see this is a poor match, or this person's dragging you off, or maybe they're like pulling you away from your career or other things that are important to you, right? Because they tend to be quite impulsive, impetuous, but you let it happen, right? And you lose yourself in this person. I see this happen a lot, and that very often this ends in horrible heartbreak, because often people at the extreme end of the sexy spectrum are also not that great with being faithful. Another way that people get tripped up is they get lulled into the safety end of the spectrum. So I find women do this more than men, but when women enter a phase of their life where they want to start settling down, they start looking for a guy that's really safe and reliable. And so they look for a guy who's very stable, his income is stable, he's emotionally stable, he's the rock emotionally. He will look after the kids, he'll always be there for her. And they do this, and what I see happening is this is where you get desperate housewives. This is where you get the whole, he's great on paper, there's nothing wrong with the guy, but I want something else. I'm getting excited by my pool boy, by the gardener, by, whoever. I wanted this holiday to, I don't know, Mexico, and I felt so tempted, and blah, 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 blah. This is where you get this stuff arising, because you start to feel stifled by the lack of novelty and adventure in your life. And the fourth, and probably this is going to relate to almost everyone watching, okay? The fourth way that people get tripped up is that they themselves are not living in the appropriate place in the spectrum. And what do I mean by this? Now, I see this a lot, men and women, for starters. I see them often, we should be more evenly spread on the spectrum, right? But I see in modern society, a lot of men and women living on the safe end of the spectrum. But what I see, because I deal with this on a day-to-day basis in my life, men and women themselves, for their own life, forget a dating partner right now, deep down inside desperately want to be more sexy. They want to be more wild. That's who they really deep down are, right? I am more wild than I feel like I'm behaving right now. I say this all the time with guys being too nice, right? Or women being too accommodating, too sweet. You want to be more wild, you crave it, but you're not doing it, right? So when you're living on that end of the spectrum, you're not going to be as appealing to someone higher up on that spectrum, right? So you're not likely to meet the right kind of partner who's at the level you want to be at. You really are at your core. And that's something that you need to explore in your life, because you may be meeting consistently the wrong type of person because you're living on the wrong end of that spectrum. Now, I also see it up the sexy end of the spectrum. I see that I see it with guys who are emotionally traumatized. I do see that. Guys who don't trust love, and they're like become hypersexual as a way to get needs met, but also try to seek some safety and validation through sex. Doesn't work that well, but it's a strategy. But I also see women doing this. A number of women unfortunately learn, and Tinder's made this worse, that one way to get validation emotionally is through sex, right? Is to be sexy. If the sexier you are, the more attention you get from men and sometimes women, right? So by learning to inhabit that end and derive your value from living at that end of the spectrum, you can often become hypersexualized, hyper pushed towards the sexy end of the spectrum, when actually at your core, you want to be lower down. And so I do regularly see this at some point in their lives. Women get into their 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, they start to really feel the body clock ticking, and they realize how much they need safety. And it's interesting. I see it on Tinder profiles now and again. I'll see a woman's profile and she's like, I want a long-term relationship. I want someone who won't treat me like a sex object. They're literally saying these things because they've learned to live that way and they want to stop. But I look at all their photos and it's like bikini shot, ass shot, blah, 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 blah. I'm not making fun of them. I'm saying they're so used to living that way and deriving their value that way that it's quite a hard shift for them to make to move downwards. But these are the ways that I see men and women really dating the wrong people, is either being in the wrong part of the spectrum themselves, or not being aware of where they lie, and thinking about when they meet someone to potentially date, is this person roughly where I am on the spectrum, where I would be organically? And yeah, that is the cause of many relationship failures that I see, you know, is this kind of inconsistency, is incongruity between the two people. That's a lot of fights that I see as well. So anyway, I hope this has been interesting to you guys watching. I don't want to harp on about it too much. It's a relatively simple concept to get down. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Does this does this really speak well to your past relationships when you look at it? Things that went well, things that went badly, the people you're seeking now. Are you feeling like you are currently living on the wrong end of the spectrum? Do you secretly crave to be more wild? I know a lot of you do, because I see this all the time with the clients that I work with. As always, guys and gals, if you want to work with me, you certainly can. I offer one-on-one consultations. If you want to find out more about that, I'll put a link in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you in my future videos.